Okay, let's cross straight to Jerusalem now and bring in Professor Gerald Steinberg. He's a professor of political studies at Bar Ilan University in Jerusalem. Thanks for joining us, Professor. First up, could you bring us the latest? What is happening in Israel? Presumably the main focus is on the hostages and whether there's any possibility of getting them back, or are there still terrorists being hunted down in the south of Israel?
I'd say there are three important fronts to keep in mind. First of all, we're still under attack from rockets and missiles from Gaza. We just had an attack that covered Jerusalem. We ran into shelters. You may hear a siren while we're talking. You may see me running into my shelter if necessary. That shows you the pictures of, I guess, a few hours ago, because it's daytime now. But probably dozens of rockets were sent all together in an attempt to kill and injure other Israelis. Also, the second front is there are still people from the Hamas terrorists from Gaza who came in through the fence, who ran through on Saturday. The hundreds of them came in. Some of them are still at large. They're being hunted down. We haven't heard of any casualties in the last 24 hours from that. But if they can find Israeli civilians, they'll probably kill and maim them as well. The third front is the hostages. There's not much discussion. It's certainly very, very painful, the pictures that we all see. We all know people who have been taken as hostage or members of family that are taken as hostages. And that's something that's going to continue to be an issue that Israel will have to deal with. I do not see any way in which Israel is going to release Palestinian terrorists, including members of Hamas, at this situation, because that will just encourage further attacks, the type of massacres that we saw just a few days ago.
Yeah, it's a terrible situation. There's no doubt that the Israeli military will have to look at going into Gaza and clearing it out door by door. We'll wait and see what progress is there. But I want to get your sense, Gerald, of what's behind this. Is this Iran firing up the extremists in Hamas in order to head off any peace deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia?
I don't think the Hamas people and Palestinian terrorists in general, and let's remember it's not just Hamas, there's Islamic Jihad, there are all sorts of other organizations. It's a matter of different uniforms, if they wear uniforms, but basically the same philosophy, which is destroy Israel, kill all Israelis, kill, maim, massacre, get rid of Israel. It's been the same approach. It's really been almost 100 years that we've had massacres like this. This is the worst, the biggest, the most tragic, the most completely incomprehensible and brutal. But we had them in 1929, we had them in the 1930s, we had them in 1948. This is a standard Palestinian strategy, if you can call it that. And that's something that we've lived with, unfortunately, and died with for many years, and something Israel still has to, for the foreseeable future, until the world forces Palestinians to change their objectives from getting rid of Israel to living side by side. That's something, by the way, that I think in Australia there needs to be much greater conversation about, a realistic image of what Palestinian politics is all about. It's about getting rid of Israel and killing as many Israelis as possible. So they didn't need any encouragement. What they did get from Iran was a lot of help, the capabilities. We saw Iranian involvement, perhaps in the planning and the preparation, probably in terms of the types of technology they used to fool Israel. And that's a major issue that's going to have to be carefully investigated. How is it this terrible thing was allowed to happen? How were we not aware this was going to happen? And then after that also, we have the problem or the threat of having a northern front, because Hezbollah, which is supported directly by Iran, based in Lebanon, has far more rockets and missiles and may try to do the same type of invasion. We've had a general call-up of reserves. There are thousands of Israeli soldiers now on the Lebanese border, so it's unlikely Hezbollah will be able to do what Hamas did, but it's a major concern. So Iran is part of the picture. They're not the only problem.
Yeah, Gerald, when we hear the stark reality, though, and I agree with your assessment, I mean, this is what the militants, the Islamist extremists want. They want the elimination of Israel. So it puts the lie to this mirage of a two-state solution that the whole of the world talks about. How can that ever happen when one side actually wants the elimination of one of those states? And I wonder if you could just answer that in the context of now protests we're seeing all around the world. Incredibly unnerving to see them on the streets of Sydney last night and tonight, supporting the Palestinian territories, the Palestinian people, and condemning Israel.
There's a lot of hate. There's a lot of disinformation and demonization. There's been a campaign to propagandize against Israel, to demonize Israel for the last 75 years since Israel was created, or even before. And some of these people are motivated, and some of the organizations that fund. Let's remember, there's a lot of funding going on behind the scenes also. And some of that comes from UN funding. So when Australia gives to UNRWA, other organizations, some of that goes to support this type of demonization and incitement that goes from Palestinians to university campuses around the world. Sometimes it gets colored, put in the framework of so-called human rights and international law. Those are all lies. There's no international right to behead people, to massacre them. None of this. There certainly is an international right for Israel to defend himself, but that's been demonized. And these people are, some of them are hardcore Israel haters, called it anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, whatever you want. We've seen that for generations. And many of them are just, they don't know. They've been basically propagandized in all sorts of different ways, certainly on university campuses. And that's something that we have to be far more vigilant about opposing, because that is a serious problem. And you see the support that the terrorists get from these kinds of demonstrations, not just in Sydney. We've seen them in Toronto. We've seen them in various other cities
all around the world. Shocking. Thanks for joining us, Gerald. I appreciate your insights. Stay safe.